It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! Take 4 on this video. Something has befallen every previous take, so apologize if I seem a little bit. I'm trying to remember what I've said in this video as opposed to in a past video. So, also I'm having allergy issues because the temperature's been really unseasonably warm, then it drops below freezing again, then it's really unseasonably warm, so we're getting windstorms, which completely freak me out. And I'm also having seasonal allergies in a season I normally don't have seasonal allergies. I usually get one season a year, winter, where I don't have allergies. They're still happening this winter. So, which is great freaking timing because I thought I'd have no problem with all the voices and stuff like that for the holiday event on Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, December 21st, a Justice Carol. It's an audio play that we're going to run with songs, and then we're going to have some Zoom hangouts afterwards. So it's like a little online Christmas party that I'm doing for my community. Patrons do get in free. So if you would like to prepay a year in advance, starts at $1 a month. If you want to prepay in advance and get in free, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. The information's all posted. The patrons can see and all that stuff. If you want to just pay $10 to get in as a non-patron, that's an option too. Would make more sense to pay the extra too. But there you go. So that's clicking along. It's going to be fun. And then what I'm basically going to do is release one scene a day the week between Christmas and New Year's. That's going to be my holiday content. It will have some things that don't make as much sense because the music has to get stripped out of it. But YouTube overlords not recognizing when you pay for a music bed, that is licensing, no, it's not. You have to fight them, and it takes too much work, and sometimes I don't recognize it, and it's a big mess. And anyway, hope you can join us. So moving on to the feedback for the week. I very briefly want to correct the record on something. I didn't intend to come across as calling out people who watch, just are regular watchers of the content who watch it on like 1 1/4, 2 times speed, 3 times speed. So people in the Wellness Wednesday video felt really called out. That was not what I attempted to say at all. It's about people who play back the video in their own content and make me sound like an insane chipmunk, because that changes the mannerisms, right? Especially me, where I come from many cultures who tend to be loud and talk with their hands. And, speed of speech is a sort of a thing that some people associate with agitation. So when something's sped up and they're suggesting, I'm insane or off the rails or something like that, or worse, a bigot, I call bullshit on that. That's an attempt to manipulate, not regular people just watching because they want to do it faster. Not the same thing at all. Just wanted to be clear because I'm like, oh God, I did not mean to make people feel called out there. Which is why it's good to have this opportunity to sort of correct the record, like we talked about on Wednesday. Moving on to the comments for Tuesday, which was the only, meaty video other than Wellness Wednesday this week because windstorm, no internet on Monday. Like 85 to 90% of the comments on that video were Feedback Friday worthy. So picking which ones to include was really tough. I've selected a smattering, which is a combination of people actually asking the questions I asked, because I like to reward when people respond to solicited advice. I like to give opportunities for solicited advice so that, because I tend to ignore unsolicited advice because there's so much of it. So it's a mix of that and then a mix of things that I read and went, you know what? Yeah, this is what my gut is telling me. I agree with this. This is how I'm going to proceed. So this is one of the really good Feedback Fridays where it's like, you guys convinced me of certain things, and that's awesome. Now, I recognize that the video was about how productive dialogue on the internet is almost impossible, and this is proof of productive dialogue on the internet. It's that little sliver, right? It's that little glimmer of hope. But I think that's part of the reason it's effective to talk about this, because we actually can talk about tough stuff for the most part. I'm going to start with a comment that is cheeky, and I wanted to start here and, move up in terms of a classier response. But I have to give some space and air to this. The fact that when you do, try to understand that when you do get bombarded with this stuff on a regular basis, I hit a point where everything becomes funny and I get cheeky, and that is misunderstood a lot of the time. And this commenter said, I think I'll let my inner troll out. I think the only way to have these conversations is to reclaim the terms. Use both. Get everyone angry, then shame everyone for skipping the message due to their anger. And I am going to do that right now, because there were some people in the comment section who went on at length just berating me. No, it's pregnant women. So I'm going to say pregnant people until the pregnant people side beat up on me, because you missed the point. You missed the point of the statement. That was not an invitation to try to persuade me of the rightness of your cause. It was a time to recognize, back the fuck off trying to persuade me in the rightness of your cause. You are coming on too strong. And this is the issue with certain groups and how they advocate their position. And I'm making a big show of this right now because I think what I'm saying right now is the way a lot of people, at least based on the comments, respond as well. That they just are going to go with the side that isn't shouting at them or is shouting at them the least. Because those people seem reasonable and fucking sane. And I know reasonable is a charged term. I don't care at this moment. As another commenter said, if something needs to be said, it needs to be said. Sometimes you can't say something necessary without pissing people off or triggering them. If you're going to walk on eggshells, recognize you're going to break some shells. Good line. People aren't delicate. Some are. Say what you mean. Say what you feel needs to be said. If someone attempts to derail, let them do it alone. You don't have to validate everybody, and you can't validate everybody. And that's true. That if you validate everybody, then what does your validation mean, right? Validation feels good because everybody doesn't get it. This isn't a participation ribbon community, right? This is why I do Feedback Friday. Reading comments is a sort of validation of those comments. I validate the positives. I validate high quality comments, even when sometimes they disagree with me, because I want to foster positive communication. And if all you focus on is the people who are screaming at you the loudest, well, then what are you going to cultivate? People who scream at you. And it's interesting because I did lose about 70 subscribers because I dared to say that I thought J.K. Rowling went too far. It was an aside in a video. They got really angry at me in the comments and then unsub. It's like, really? I mean, that's when I'm like, if people are going to get that triggered because my attitude is people have the right to their views, people don't have the right to misrepresent in stating their views. And I have a real sensitivity to people who threaten to bring in the police on things that are not police matters, and 3 people holding a sign on holding signs on a public street outside a building that is on bus tours because it's a tourist landmark that's the wall surrounding someone's private castle, that's not a police matter. Those people, it was clearly, in some ways a tactical mistake because it gave J.K. Rowling a chance to play the victim again, and some people bought into it, but it was not a moral wrong, and it was certainly not a threatening behavior. And if people want to unsub from my channel because of that, see ya. Like, if that's too far for you, see ya. I also am, I'm trans friendly here. And certain things are binaries. Certain things you have to pick a side, so to speak. And I want non-binary, gender fluid, gender queer, and transgender individuals to come here and be able to relax. And in order to have that, some things gotta go. At bringing into the next comment, I don't think there's any way to guarantee not being yelled at. That was a really common thing. But to minimize it and produce the fairest outcome, this is where my ears pricked up. Produce the fairest outcome. This is what I'm looking for. Yes. I would suggest applying democracy. Either make your own common sense judgments, which phrasings of these various language constructions are the common parlance term used by the general public rather than the political brand name term used by extreme partisans, and go with the former, or outright poll the patrons, and majority wins in terms of what language choice to go with in these various sticky wickets. And that's essentially what I do. It depends on the term. Sometimes I'll just say, I'm going to use the term people use because people understand this term. Other times, in the instance of Latinx, I don't use that term except there, because my Hispanic viewers can't stand the term. It's like, well, if the people that watch my content that should like this term don't, I'm not going to use it. That's just polite. And the explanation that it is not correct Spanish. It's difficult for people who are Spanish speaking to pronounce because double consonants don't tend to be at the end of words. How do you pronounce that? Fair. I say Hispanic. Why? Because poll after poll after poll said the vast majority of people who identify that way prefer the term Hispanic. Also, Hispanic also applies to Spanish-speaking people in Mexico and Latin America. Mexico's part of North America. So, and I up here in Canada, we say they're, from Mexico or Ecuador or El Salvador, or Venezuela, and we tend to separate by country. We don't try to flatten the experience to be all one thing. But moving on, yes, that's one of the things that it makes sense. It, as another commenter said, that possible solutions sound laborious, and they can be, but anything worth doing is worth putting some work into it. Another person said, as encouragement, if you're drawing attention from thought leaders, people don't react to non-issues. That's interesting, though. I wish I'd get more positive attention, not just negative attention. People only seem to pay attention when they want to slap a bigot label on me, and that's frustrating. If partisans are freaked out enough about what you have to say and trying to cut things off at the past, I personally consider that a win. Abstract, sure, but a win. And yeah, I think that is what these various very loud people with big channels are doing. For whatever reason, they see me as a threat and they want to cut that off. It tends to backfire. But yeah, it is a form of win. I just wish the wins were sometimes a little more enjoyable. Maybe that's too much to ask. And then they say, question about how to really change internet discourse, I think you already have your answer. There's no productive conversation to be had with a mob spamming ratio. There's not enough bandwidth in that relationship to work with, and far too many perverse incentives to promote any positive change. Emotionally speaking, those interactions are primary colors. The brain loves heuristics, so obviously humanoid says bad thing, me no like humanoid. Right. Fun fact, I actually stopped watching All In with Chris Hayes because he kept mentioning ratio, Twitter ratios. And I'm like, Twitter ratios are not a metric of being right, and I don't want the mind worms from a host that acts like it is. And so I don't watch anywhere near as much primetime cable news as I used to, but Joy Reid would finish, I'd turn off Chris Hayes, I'd turn on Rachel Maddow because I don't want the mind worms. And when people I am supposed to respect the opinion of start talking about something as stupid as a Twitter ratio as something that is persuasive in any way, I nope out. If people can unsub from my channel for dumb shit, I can do that. I agree that tailoring the message to the audience is essential, but I don't think it can be done on the open internet because that tailoring will be received as duplicitous, given how intensely negative the internet is to begin with. And I thought that was an interesting observation that, yes, that is something that I have had trouble with in the past, my attempts to tailor a message to a particular group of people that I don't agree with, but want to offer some dialogue, want to offer some understanding to. That was twisted into things that it wasn't. And that's incredibly frustrating because I think more people have to, see people that they disagree with, but they think they can have a conversation with and engage there, which is, what I was calling, I'm going to call that my 2014 crew. Because, instead of dropping the G word, the Gamergate word, the 2014 crew, the people that, came from the other side, so to speak, the 2014 crew, that's what happened, right? We came at that issue from very different places and didn't even like each other that much at the beginning. But we had enough of an open mind that we talked. We found out we had a lot more in common than I think any of us thought. The same commenter used the term ideological payload, which I thought was really interesting in the context of one can validate the feelings and experiences of an individual and still disagree with their ideological payload. And I like that. I'm going to think about that ideological payload that, yeah, you can understand how somebody got where they got and still really disagree with the bomb that seems to be either going off inside their head or, poised to go off inside their head. And I think that's where I'm at with J.K. Rowling. Yep, I've seen people go down that sort of rad femme rabbit hole. I pulled out of that tailspin myself. In university, I get how people get there. It's still brainworms, and, the same commenter said the whole thing demands social skills, curious perspective, active listening, so on and forth. It's just really hard. And that's not going to happen in tweets, right? It's not going to happen in a single tweet. Similarly, and this was another one where this was a commenter who's been kind of harsh on me lately. And so I wanted to feature this comment because it's like, all right, this is where this person's coming from. Like I said, I can see where someone got here. I can validate that, right? Part of me wants to say it's everything I was complaining about the last year and how abusers aren't called to task or even rewarded just on a macro scale, and leave it at that. I guess it isn't that simple, but you can't find the right words because we've heard them all and we've heard the wrong ones from the same people and seeing the wrong actions as well. After a while, you just get preconditioned to expect the knife in the back. And yeah, that makes complete sense. I get where that comes from. I would offer that when you're expecting the knife in the back so intensely that you jump the minute anybody kind of comes at you sideways and you counter with a knife to the front. Well, since that person wasn't actually looking to stab you in the back, all you did was draw the first blood, so to speak. And that's something I don't succeed. Part of the reason I got so pissed off at the latest J.K. Rowling thing is my first reaction to the docs, 3 people standing outside a public landmark with signs, was that was really stupid and counterproductive. And then when I found out I'd been played, that her house is not a secret, it's not a dox if it's publicly available information, and like can find on a quick Google search, not like going through white pages sort of thing. I was pissed off because I got duped initially. And if I got duped, other people will. And it's like, no, line fucking crossed here. Right. But it's interesting because the same commenter who has been triggered by certain word choices of mine in the past said, I don't see the solution in finding the right words. I'm like, okay, go on. The issue to me seems to be that people are writing their own intent of things and we blindly go along with it. Said aloud, the idea that someone doesn't respect you if they don't use the one correct word you want sounds like not listening to the person for what they mean. Meanwhile, the same person may not think much about what they're saying and how overkill some of the responses are for what was intended as a benign act. We need to stop the dickering over language and actually be willing to have the conversation about what we intend with our words. And this is where we get into this very sticky thing about intent. And I think this needs its own video. Because I'm writing this down. This is a deep well, and the balance between intent and how a message was received and who's responsible for what. I want to give it the time, and we don't have it right now, but interesting heard. Someone brought up the philosopher Hannah Arendt, and I'm like, what? Oh, interesting. Okay. And in the 1960s, she talked about loss of tradition as cultural foundation. And this commenter brought this into this topic. One side resents that loss and wants to go back. Kind of hard. The other side thinks they can create a new tradition out of whole cloth. They can't. That means the answer is based on, or if there is any answer, then it is based on a lifelong learning mindset. People need to get used to challenging their beliefs past the time when they would usually fossilize in a dogma around age 25. What that looks like, let's unpack that. Because I think essentially they're right. That really is it. That you've got the traditionalists who are just losing their minds right now. And you've got the people who think they can just burn it all down and build a paradise from the ashes. And unfortunately, historically, any time that's been tried, you don't get a paradise. You get Lord of the Flies or the Napoleonic era, or the Ottoman Empire, or you get just new shit, looks a lot like the old shit, slightly different smell, but it's still shit, right? It's one unbalanced, unequal society versus another unbalanced, unequal society, right? We don't want that. We want to move towards equality. So, yeah. Another commenter broke this down really well. The world of online discussion is miserable because it works on a fairly consistent paradigm of negative reward and positive punishment. Worst case scenario, people pick you apart of a storm of engagement that's all negativity. Best case scenario, people don't feel any particular need to engage with the topic as everything worthwhile was already said. What does that mean? It means that you only get engagements, which YouTube lights up over when it's negative. In online discussions, one is only ever engaging with the vocal minority who disagrees enough to say so, regardless of the silent majority that is either in agreement or relatively neutral or even completely disengaged from the topic. No matter what number of people get upset, it will always be dwarfed by the number of people who didn't get upset, but there's no online discussion with people who nodded or shrugged and moved on with their lives. And that's something that's really hard to keep in mind when you do the sort of content I do. The bigger challenge is to keep it in mind but not say anything about it, because talking about that tends to get misconstrued and warped as you're not listening to criticism. It's like, no, I'm listening to the criticism. I'm properly sorting the criticism into the criticisms of a vocal minority. You know, a video that gets 75% likes versus dislike ratio compared to a 95% like dislike ratio is still 3-1 positive for the people who cared to hit a button. That matters. Even when it's 50-50, that doesn't mean you were wrong. It could mean you didn't express yourself clearly, like Wellness Wednesday this week. But it also could just mean that somebody decided to hate bomb your video to try to persuade you were wrong instead of actually using, persuasion instead of bullying. And I try to make sure that doesn't work to try to discourage it, because the commenter goes on to say the reward punishment paradigm would need to shift to one of positive reward and negative punishment. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all in order to feel better. But the format of online discussion doesn't allow for that. I don't want people to just respond when they're nice. I don't mind a certain amount of pushback as long as it's pushback to what I actually said, as opposed to some twisting of my words or emotional tangent that somebody went off on. Big difference between those two things. But point taken, good point. This is a comment I'm going to land on because I sort of went, you know what? This commenter's right. In a way, it's kind of unsatisfying because of that control thing, but this commenter's right. I honestly think you'll have to soldier on the way you do. Stay respectful, put in disclaimers now and then with certain words, and if somebody freaks out, let them freak out. This must be healed by time, the same way all reasonable people from the 2014 crew of the 2014 culture wars just got sick and tired of the screaming. People will get tired of the control freaks, which still are the minority. The majority sits in the background and silently follows content, while probably 10 to 20% of all the already troublesome people went full on maniac on conspiracy and the desperate quest for control of anything within their lives. So the only thing we'll have to do is wait for happier times when people want crazy fun instead of crazy control again. Some weird period like in the late 90s is all we can hope for after COVID. There's no tactic to deal with this otherwise. Go on with respect for the audience and yourself and wait until there are less crazy people with too much time on the internet. And I think that's part of the reason I admit that, Mary Just and I decided to make a game. Is it something that, won't be consumed for a year or two, so we can kind of make something for that time where people want crazy fun that, makes jokes with some things, but, the jokes are in service of the crazy fun. Like, let's invoke this to have fun with it, not to make a point, looking forward into the future that way and going, we think there's going to be an appetite for this in a year or two. So let's go there instead of just sitting there, wait. Let's go into the future we want to see now, because and like I said, it is sort of unsatisfying to have to just keep eating the shit until the mushrooms grow, and hope they're green mushrooms and red mushrooms like in Mario that gives you superpowers instead of the ones that poison you. I do think, like, based on what people have said and the combination of feedback, it's like, yeah, okay, that does work. And yeah, okay, I'm already kind of doing that. And yeah, okay, it seems I'm doing everything I really can do. It's a fortitude check. It's not about strength or dexterity or intelligence. It's wisdom and fortitude. I'm tired of tanking. I don't want to be a tank. I want to be a wizard sometimes. I want to cast magic missile and cone of cold and stuff like that instead of just being the one that gets beat on by the giant sub-boss monster, but we all have our classes in life, and knowing that's probably the right solution is sort of an HP boost. Um, Curious as to what your responses are to this. Maybe I'll do the intent video, intent versus thing. I mean, that's kind of a Wellness Wednesday. Kind of, what do you think? Is that thing about the role of intent or the importance of intent in communications, is that a Wellness Wednesday topic, or is that another day of the week? I've been struggling with some of the requests lately for this particular reason. Is like, is this a social thing, or is this a mental health and personal wellness thing? Let me know. And of course, once again, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. Thanks for watching.